Okay, hello everyone. Here we are for video number 2. I hope video number 1 is at least tolerable. And so I'm going to devote this particular vid to Hasty, 1986. So the title is On the Problem of Succession and Continuity in 20th Century Music by Christopher F. Hasty. So it's from Music Theory Spectrum, Volume 8, that's 1986. And the page run is 58 to 74. Okay, so Tanya, if you still are struggling to locate the source, hopefully that will help, but I'm sure Charles and you will be willing to help out from their Strauss as and when we need to convey that information. Okay, so let's dive straight in. What you've asked me for is some guidance and perhaps also, Charles said specifically, an attempt to unpick some of the more extended diagrams. So I'll try and do that. What I'm going to do is work through from page 58 through to page 66. So pages 58 to 66, and then I'm going to stop. What I'd like you to do is answer the questions that I pose. Then secondly, to tell me if you would be confident working through the remainder on your own, or whether you would like me to try and compile another video to cover the whole of Hasty. Perhaps then I could offer up some broad questions to deal with the next article by Brian Elegant and his co-author, or whether or not you would be content to work through Hasty independently, and then I could do exactly the same as I've done for Hasty, perhaps cover half of it, half of the next reading that is. So let me know which you would prefer. I can do all of Hasty, or I can do just the amount that I do today, and then you would feel confident to work through the remainder of what he's trying to do yourselves. So let's begin thinking about Hasty. As I say, I'm going to cue you to a recording. That's by the London Sinfonietta and Esa-Pekka Salonen. And it also has a score, so you can follow the piece and get used to really what is the main frame of this particular article, which is a discussion of Stravinsky's symphonies of wind instruments from the second decade of the 20th century. So let's begin on page 58. The first thing that Hasty says is that the perceived dissolution of traditional form-defining precepts in post-tonal music was at first assumed to be a deficiency, and this deficiency was argued in part by the composers themselves, or at least it was a belief they had, even if they didn't always admit to it, because the music did not seem to have a teleology built into it. By teleology we mean a sense of goal-directedness. Now, it's argued by Schenker principally that tonal music has a sense of goal-directedness, but the impression left by post-tonal music is that it has no similar sense of end direction. What composers did instead, so the work we have done in post-tonal theory, was to develop integrative principles which would substitute in respect of particular time organization. But how to understand that? So that's really the question that Hasty poses to us. And he said, perhaps we can best address it in terms of change. So we may think in terms of Lefkowitz and Tauler partly, and that would be appropriate. But he says the conditions broadly that they also identify of continuous as opposed to discontinuous change. So that's the context that's established, the sense of how is time organized, how is post-tonal music able to give us, if it is, a sense of unfolding flow of musical purpose moving through time. Okay, so here's my first question. This is question number 1. How did Ligeti, George Ligeti, understand this? And which composer did he regard as especially innovative prior to 1945? So how did Ligeti understand this phenomenon? And which composer did he regard as especially innovative in this respect prior to 1945? So I just want a short answer, 3 or 4 words will do. Question 2. Which American composer saw this as a consequence of time becoming atomized? Which American composer that Hasty refers to saw this as a consequence of time becoming atomized? Question 3. How did this particular composer then understand that duration should be viewed? In other words, how should duration be viewed as a consequence of time becoming atomized? Again, short answers, not essay length, please. Just a single sentence or a few words will do. Question 4. So this is the fourth question. Which term was advanced by Karlheinz Stockhausen to describe the impression of static eternity implied by an isolated musical event? Stockhausen had a term for the way that a single musical event could itself imply a sort of static eternity. What was his term for this isolated musical event? Okay, so a little more commentary from me. Hasty's view is that we have to approach the succession of events in a post-tonal context as still forming a necessary relationship. A relationship that is between what comes before, what is happening now, and what will follow, what happens after. So what happened before, what is happening now, and what will come after. He says, in fact, that comprehensibility is reliant on the formulation of connection. In other words, we have to form connections. That is, musical process is still relevant as a conceptual frame, as a directional phenomenon entailing predictive causal connection. If this event happens, in other words, we expect this event to follow, even if that expectation is denied. We think of tonal music and a deceptive cadence. In post-tonal music, the sense of expectation is greatly attenuated, greatly reduced, massively reduced in actual fact. But Hasty says we should not give up on that belief. It is still a relevant one for us to think about. Now then, here's question number 5. So we're moving to talk about Stravinsky's symphonies of wind instruments. Composed 1920, revised 1947. And we're introduced to 3 prior commentators on this Stravinsky piece. So the first one is Laszlo Zomfai. Again, a short response. How did Zomfai regard the sense of organization in this piece? What term did he apply? What term did Edward T. Cohn apply to this piece? How did he see its basic concept as working out? Lastly, how did Jonathan Kramer think of this piece as being organized? What kind of conceptual frame did Jonathan Kramer apply? So that's my question 5. Okay, this is the opportunity now to think about a musical example. So I hope Charles is happy if I actually address this, or try to. And we're going to look at example 1. That's measures 1 to 6. So example 1 appears on page 64. Let's take a look at that. So what are we dealing with musically? Just the first 6 measures. Hasty points out several features. First of all, the type of harmonic vocabulary that Stravinsky is using. So we have a couple of trichords, 3733 or set class 025, set class 014. We have a couple of tetrachords, 417, set class 0134, and 410, set class 0235. Okay, so those are the collections that create the sense of harmonic field. If we're smart, we might also think that at least 2 of them, those are the tetrachords, are already hinting at a broader musical shape or a broader musical collection. We'll come to that as we continue the discussion. The thing that Hasty's particularly interested in is the upper melodic line. He says that is continuous if we hear it as 2 interval class 3s projected, that is D6 to B5 and F6 to D6. So we have a sort of D6 to B5 and then a higher level F6 to D6. So he says I'm hearing those as particular important melodic units. But he says the actual projection of that is rendered fluid because of the cross accentuation that Stravinsky's rhythmic frame sets up. He says really we're talking about 3 separate gestures. Well, 4 I think. He says that there are actually three versions of an X gesture, so that's set up at the beginning, immediately repeated, and then extended by a Y gesture before we get a third version of the X gesture, which then is, he says, left incomplete, possibly open. But this music takes us back to X because it comes back to the initiating pitch in the top line, and that is D natural 6. But Hasty doesn't think that this resolves the whole question. He says, how is the pitch content then organised? Or is it the case that the rhythm really dictates to pitch? Or is it the case that pitch is dictating to rhythm? In other words, which of these is primary? So we'll nonetheless notice at the same time, if we actually look at the next example, so that's moving on to example 2, which he says has been interpreted by one of his colleagues then at Yale called Peter van den Toorn. And van den Toorn says, well, yes, gestures, yes, the things you talk about, but maybe what we have to think about is the way that the top line and the bottom line are effectively retrogrades in terms of rhythmic accent. So we have here a sort of simple musical notation, which is forward slashes equal downbeats, and then the cup signs, the U's are upbeats. So where we have downbeats in the top line marked by the accents, we can see them on the D6s there. Then we have several sequences of upbeat, in other words, what the conductor would do before downbeat and then upbeat. But look at that sequence is then reversed, the opening of it, which is upbeat, upbeat, because of the offbeat accents that are there in the bass line from F3 to B flat 3. And then we get a sense of on the beat articulation in the bass line with the same pitches, F3, B flat 3, F3, but now it's the bass that is marking out a more confident downbeat effect. Okay, let's move on and now look at page 65 and now concentrating on what Kramer does next. So he throws out now the opening first 6 measures to encompass in example 3 measures 7 to 13. He says that actually they seem to perhaps cancel the sense of the opening segment. He says, on the other hand, why is this? Why do I believe that those measures sort of, despite the fact that the same gestural sequence is there, X1, X2, then an extension, an elision, and then an X3. He says, I can't make full sense of that. He says, nonetheless, that Jonathan Kramer argues that you can make sense of this in terms of something. There is a way to understand how this unit follows the first unit. It's not such a big sort of chasm or sort of disjunction as Hasty is suggesting. Hasty questions it, but my question 6 to you is this. So I'm playing off now Kramer, Jonathan Kramer against Christopher Hasty. So question 6, why and how does Kramer argue that the first unit measures 1 to 6 and the second unit measures 7 to 13 are actually connected? So they're connected for a reason. So tell me why that is. So let's move on now to page 66. What I want to look at is the big example, which is example 5. So example 5 is now compiling measures 1 to 6, that's A1, measures 7 to 13, B1, and then some new material, measures 13 to 22. We'll notice that the X units drop out. Instead, at this point, Hasty is more interested in the Y gestures. So the Y gestures are there for the A1 section, measures 1 to 6, the B1 section, measures 7 to 13, and then measures 13 to 22 end up with a new kind of termination, which is formally an A2 section, all of this, but continued until we get a new termination which we've not had before, which he calls Z. So in other words, we've had our X units, but now it's the terminations, ending with Y, ending with Y, ending with Z. He says, however, that the significant aspect of all of this is actually the way in which Stravinsky, through that top line, has been projecting a consistent kind of harmonic logic based on, in its smallest unit, minor thirds. Those minor thirds connect together to create what would be, if it was in simple sequence, and that's the bit right at the bottom of 66, he says, a kind of continuous projection which would have a diminished seventh at its main kind of sequence of goals, and all of these would build into a bigger collection which he says is a heptad or septad, that's 731. Now, the importance of 731 at this stage is what kind of collection is it? Add another note and we can tell what that collection is. So here's my question 7, my last question. What kind of collection is 731 drawn from? And which of those collections is this? So it's missing a note. It should indicate to us nonetheless a clear articulation of a bigger collection. Which collection is that? Both in terms of its name and the type of that collection. So it's one of our familiar big collections which suggest a particular harmonic framework. Which particular harmonic framework and which version of that harmonic framework is this? Okay, so I'm going to stop there, partly because the size of this file will be ginormous before it goes onto YouTube. I'm going to stop it and then I'm going to upload it. So you'll hear from me quite soon, hopefully within the next 30 minutes. So in real time, that's about 2:50. Hopefully you'll get this and be able to view it by 3:30. All right. Thanks very much. I hope you find this useful. Answers coming back by maybe about 1 o'clock on Wednesday, and then I'll try and upload a new video probably on Thursday. What I'm finding is the workflow is very difficult to manage. So probably we'll, instead of having Monday and Wednesday as our key days, we'll use Monday and Thursday as our important days and try to stick to those. All of this is fluid and I do apologise, but I guess we all understand why the problem is there. So I will sign off now and hope to hear from you on email. And just let me know if this is doing some good. I hope that it is. I really hope that it is. Okay, bye for now.